Huh.
Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Oh, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Hello, Duke fans. Before we get started today, just wanted to quickly update you. We recorded most of this audio on Wednesday the 23rd. We're not getting it out to you until Sunday the 27th for a variety of technical and scheduling challenges. So we hope you enjoy this somewhat stale but hopefully not spoiled episode of the DBR podcast. Hello there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 323 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. We just had a show with Lynn Simon, who we hope you listened to. It was a great, fascinating interview on the Supreme Court ruling in the NCAA case versus Alston, and also just name, image, and likeness and how that's going to be shaped. Very fascinating interview. Check that out. But on this show, we're going to be discussing the NBA draft in the process of selecting Jon Scheyer as Duke's next head coach. Before we do all of that, Donald Wine here, the proud owner of the number one pick in the NCAA draft and your host for the show.
NBA draft.
Again,
you said NCAA. You mean the NBA draft?
I don't care which draft it is. The number one, we're picking all of them. Well, actually, we only picking one guy. We know who's going to be. But we'll talk about all that. Jason, you just heard. Jason Evans is here. Sam Klein is here. Jason, hello. I know we're going to skip most of the usual stuff, but how do you feel about my Pistons getting number one pick in the draft?
I don't care. I don't care because my Hawks are in the Eastern Conference Finals. Hey,
that's also cool too.
I'm sorry to Seth Curry, who was a great for the Philadelphia 76ers, but if you had told me even a week ago that the Atlanta Hawks were going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals, I would have called you crazy. And I want to point something out. In January, my son, who was in a legal jurisdiction when he did this, my son purchased a $10 ticket on the Atlanta Hawks to win the Eastern Conference. It was $10 to pay $600 on the Hawks to win the Eastern Conference. When he bought this ticket in January, I said, well, there goes $10. And now he is 4 wins away from having that reality happen for him. It would be really cool and really fun if it happened. And he's such a good Hawks fan that I said, you should hedge it. You know, when you have a ticket like that has made it so far along the line, you go, okay, I'll hedge it. I'll make a couple $100 wager on the Milwaukee Bucks. And that way, no matter what happens in the series, I make something. He's refusing to hedge. He's like, Dad, I believe in the Hawks. So I love my son for that.
Go with your gut.
He's a bad investor, but he's a good fan.
Yeah. And that's why I don't bet on my teams. You just heard Sam Klein. Sam, how are you doing today? I know, again, we're skipping most of the stuff, but react to what the Hawks, the Pistons, the Wizards, whatever.
The Wizards are at the sort of right in the middle of the Eastern Conference, so there's nothing interesting that happens around Combine time for them. They're obviously not still in the playoffs, and they're not getting Cade Cunningham. So they'll just keep chugging along. I guess I'm supposed to care about the Boston Celtics now that I live here, and the Boston Celtics seem to still be in good shape to retool for next season and hopefully come at the Hawks. My NBA affiliations are more to the Duke players than they are to any individual franchise.
As they should, and that's a great segue. While the Detroit Pistons are not going to be selecting a Duke player with the number one pick, that honor will all likelihood go to Cade Cunningham. We did have the NBA Combine that started earlier this week, and Jason's kind of been keeping track of the Duke players. He has some important information that may seem, not so interesting, but they're very interesting in the NBA world, especially when you're talking about how to grade these players. So, Jason, take it away on what you've learned from the Combine thus far.
Yeah, we're about to discuss quarter inches, half inches, inches, and things like that because, and that may seem like nothing, but it's really important. So this week at the Combine, they measured everybody. Now they're also going to be they'll be playing games and doing drills and things like that. But as crazy as it sounds, the measurements are really, really important to people's draft stock. And I want to point out that everybody showed up for these measurements except for a couple guys. The guys at the very, very top of the draft: Cade Cunningham, Jalen Green, Isaiah Jackson, Jonathan Kuminga, Evan Mobley, and Jalen Suggs did not bother to show up to even be measured at the combine, because all those guys know that they're going in the lottery. And in fact, 5-6 of those guys know that they're going in the top 5 or 6 picks. The other guy who didn't show up, and this was really interesting, and it relates to Duke and the ACC, Day'Ron Sharpe of UNC didn't even show up for the NBA combine. And some foolish Carolina fans thought, ooh, this means maybe he's thinking about coming back. No. Let me allow folks to understand. He has signed with an agent. Day'Ron Sharpe is not coming back. The reason he did not show up for the combine, I am almost certain, is that some team has promised Day'Ron Sharpe that they will take him with a first-round draft pick. And they said to him, don't go to the combine. Don't work out for other teams. We got you. We're taking you at 25, 28, whatever it may be, which is a good spot, because a lot of people were projecting Sharpe as a early, mid, second rounder. Getting first-round money is way better than second-round money, let me tell you. And so Sharpe is following that team's instructions, and he did not bother to show up as a result.
But it's still a gamble. Just to be clear out there.
Yeah, it is.
Sound bites are not sworn testimony, and especially when it comes to the NBA draft. So Day'Ron Sharpe may have gotten a promise from some team, and it's unclear what team that would be, but it's still kind of a gamble to not show up and say, hey, or work out with other teams, because a lot can happen between now and when the NBA draft occurs.
There are 50 first-round picks walking around right now.
Exactly.
In any event, so I want to move on from Day'Ron, and I want to talk first about wingspan, which was one of the things that was measured at the combine. The NBA loves wingspan. I mean, I'm telling you, wingspan is a really big deal, because it determines a lot of whether or not you can get your hands out there and deflect passes and interrupt dribblers and things like that. It's a key measurement in whether or not a guy is going to be a good defender. In NBA terms, if you have a wingspan relative to your height of plus 6 inches, if your wingspan is 6 inches more than your height, that is considered elite length. That's what the NBA is really looking for. There were 15 players at the combine who were plus 6 or better. And guys, among them was Duke's own DJ Steward, who measured out at plus 6.25 in his wingspan relative to his height. That's the good news for DJ. The bad news for DJ is that when they measured his height without shoes, and this is what the NBA cares about, because everybody can, you can put lifts in your shoes and stuff. DJ's height without shoes was just 6 foot and 3/4 inches. 6'0" and 3/4. That is small. He is less than 6'1". It is going to be really hard, probably impossible, for him to play shooting guard in the NBA at less than 6'1". It's just not done. In fact, most NBA point guards are more like 6'3", 6'4". So
we were talking a minute ago or recently about Cam Reddish. I think you guys were talking about him on the Hawks. Cam Reddish is also technically a shooting guard, and he's like 6'8".
Exactly. Now, it's worth noting that on the combine, when the combine lists all the players, they also list their position, and they were listing DJ Steward as a point guard. So the NBA is going to be drafting DJ Steward on doing something that he never did for a single second at Duke. I don't recall him playing point guard at all last year. It was Jeremy Roach, and Jordan Goldwire, and even Wendell Moore. But I don't recall DJ Steward playing any point guard, but that's what the NBA is looking for him to do. So, but regarding DJ, he had elite length, but not height. Height is an issue for him. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, we talked about these guys who are plus 6 inches or more. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there were 3 players, only 3 players who had a wingspan that was 1 inch or less longer than their height. We're talking about T-Rexes here, guys who have really short arms and long bodies. And gentlemen, I unfortunately must report that one of those 3 players with pathetic wingspan was Matthew Hurt. Matthew Hurt measured 6'8.5" for his height, and his wingspan is just 6'9.5". Now, no one expects Matthew Hurt to be a great defender in the NBA. He is going to the NBA, hopefully, to shoot 3-pointers, which is what he did so effectively at Duke. But if you're an NBA team and you're looking at drafting Matthew Hurt, you're like, dude.
Yeah, but be clear. A 6'9" wingspan, I don't care how tall or short you are, is a lot of wingspan. So there are things when you're talking about it, you can say, okay, well, this guy he's not going to be blocking shots, but that wasn't ever what he was charged to do. But he still has a long wingspan. It's just, they have algorithms and mathematicians and statisticians and just common sense people who are not in the room who say, oh, well, that's tiny. There's no way he's going to make it as a 4 guard because he only has a 6'9" wingspan.
JJ Redick is like 6'2" and has a wingspan that's like 5'10", and
right.
he's managed to make it this far. So work hard, make shots, and you'll go a long way.
So before I finish on wingspan, I just want to mention Jalen Johnson of Duke was +5 on his wingspan, not elite, but still very good. Jalen measured at 6'7 3/4" with a wingspan of 7 feet and a quarter inch. So that's a nice spot for Jalen in terms of wingspan and stuff like that. I'm gonna get back to him in 1 second, but before we finish on wingspan, I did want to note something very quickly. There is a name you're going to hear very, very early in the NBA draft, and that is Scotty Barnes from Florida State. Scotty Barnes had the highest wingspan relative to height of anyone in the NBA Combine. It was +8. Scotty measured 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan. Scotty's already an elite prospect. I'm telling you, NBA teams saw that 7'3" wingspan on a guy who's going to be a point guard in the NBA, and they are drooling right now. Scotty Barnes will be going in the first half of the lottery for sure, and I won't be shocked if someone reaches on him. He could go number 5, as high as number 5, maybe number 6, but that is like crazy wingspan on a point guard.
I saw what you did there. Reach. Someone's going to reach to take him. That was pretty
good. And we would say more about Scotty Barnes, but Duke didn't get a chance to face him this year. That was one of the bummers. One of the many bummers of this season is that our one game against Florida State got canceled for COVID, so we didn't get to see any of our guys go up against him.
It's a pity. So the other combine stuff I wanted to mention really quickly, because I've talked about a lot of things. There was a cool little thing I noted. They measure guys' hands, widest and longest hands. Gentlemen, the widest and longest hands of anyone at the combine belong to Jalen Johnson. Jalen has a 10.5-inch wide hand and a 9 3/4-inch long hand. He can palm a basketball Leonard really easily.
Maybe that's Kawhi status shape. That's right.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting.
Boards.
And the other thing I wanted to mention about Jalen was he came in with just a 4.5% body fat measurement. He was one of the leanest players in the combine. Since he left Duke, it is clear that Jalen Johnson has been working out hard. He has not put on any fat at all. Matthew Hurt, unfortunately, more bad news for Matthew Hurt, has the second worst body fat percentage of anyone at the combine, 15.2% body fat on Matthew Hurt. Hey, guys, can you guess? It's an ACC player. Can you guess who has the worst body fat percentage of anyone at the combine?
We said that Day'Ron Sharpe was not at the combine.
No, right. Day'Ron Sharpe was not. That would have been a good guess.
Sean there as a coach.
Yeah, Raekwon Gray of Florida State. Raekwon Gray comes in at 17.3% body fat. He weighed 268 pounds. That's a big boy.
that's just opportunity, baby.
Again, that is something where I look at that player and I go, I don't care. Like Zion Williamson probably wasn't, 10% body fat or whatever like that. But people looked at him and said, you know what? I still want him. I still want him number 1.
Yeah, Raekwon can play.
We can make him run enough. He can run enough suicides to get rid of that body fat. But if he can defend and he can shoot, who cares?
Okay, so rounding out my combine stat stuff just really quickly, just because the questions out there. Matthew Hurt weighed in at 232.4 pounds. He was the 10th heaviest player at the combine. DJ Steward weighed in 162.2 pounds. He was the second lightest player at the combine. And just a couple other things I wanted to note really quickly because I thought they were interesting. Marcus Bagley, Marvin Bagley's brother, was at the combine. He only measured 6'6". Now he's sort of projected as an NBA power forward. 6'6" is really small for a power forward. And I think that's a measurement that's going to hurt him. And then the other one was, folks, if you watch the NCAA tournament, Davion Mitchell of Baylor was the best player in the entire tournament. Really impressive season. He only measured at 6 feet even, which is really small for the NBA. His wingspan is just 6'4.5". I think that could hurt his stock a little bit. Teams may be a little hesitant, but man, I think his speed and explosiveness should really translate to the NBA. But I thought that was interesting. Davion Mitchell was the second smallest player at the combine at 6 feet exactly. Frankly, having watched him dominate the Final Four, I don't care what height he is. That dude can play.
It's a game of quarter inches and half inches, ladies and gentlemen. That is the NBA, and that is the NBA Combine. We're going to have much more on the Combine as we move forward, and the NBA Draft as we move into the summer. We're going to take a very quick break. On the other side, our next coach is in this room. Who said it and why after this? And we are back. And like I mentioned in the teaser before the break, this quote, our next coach is in this room. That was said by Chris Carrawell when Coach K told the coaching staff that he was going to retire after this upcoming season. And when Chris Carrawell said that, he looked at Jon Scheyer. That is part of an incredible article that's very insightful about the Duke coaching search. It's in The Athletic. Brendan Marks and Seth Davis collaborated on this piece, and it gets into how the coaching process went, how it remained a secret this entire time, what the process was like for Jon Scheyer, and again, how it was his colleague Chris Carrawell that kind of initiated the idea that Jon Scheyer could be the next coach at Duke.
Hey Donald, are we 100% sure that Carrawell wasn't talking about himself?
We don't know, but it sounds like when everything happened, they looked right at him. But Sam,
I was going to say the great thing in that article is when Carrawell mentions that, Coach K looks at Jon Scheyer and says, "Yeah, I was hoping to have a conversation with you in just a little bit." So
right.
It's clear Coach K was thinking the same way Sewell was.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you guys don't have The Athletic, get it, read this article. It's powerful stuff. Sam, I want to start with you. Give me your takeaways, what you saw from this article that you took away. And really just, it's very rare to have an article that has so much that you learn from it, but we had one in this case.
Well, I did want to note, I believe that this is the article that finally tipped Jason towards subscribing to The Athletic. So
it is.
This is correct.
So,
yes.
Things you can learn. One thing that I found so fascinating about this was how well it seems like everybody at Duke kept the secret. Like, if you go read the article, it sounds like it was weeks of Coach K telling the staff that he's going to retire and that they're starting a search, and then that they went through this whole search process, and it is much more detailed than I had sort of assumed it was, given how quickly the announcement came from the time that the rumor started, which was, and the first rumor was basically Jeff Goodman tweeting that Coach K is stepping down at the end of next season and Jon Scheyer is likely going to be the next coach. And the announcement came a couple hours after that officially from Duke. I figured when we talked about this that, like, all right, maybe they didn't do a whole formal search process, but it sounds like they did hire a search firm. I don't know why they needed to do that. It's not like they had any shortage of candidates that were so obvious, but that Scheyer went through multiple rounds of interviews with folks running the athletic department, that senior deputy athletic director John Jackson was running that. Nina King was involved, some other administrators, and President Price and the board of trustees. All these people were part of the process to ultimately just promote Jon Scheyer out of his current job into the next job up. So it looks like, from the outside, it looks like not a whole lot happened here, but it does sound like there was a lot, and that along the way, nobody talked about it. Nobody said anything to the media, at least, and if they did, nobody in the media felt like it was worth reporting for whatever reasons. That just tells you how tight the whole process is here at Duke, and that none of it came out. I was most fascinated by that. The other thing that I found interesting, and it sort of ties to the conversation that the two of you were having in my absence the other day, was about Chris Carrawell getting promoted to associate head coach. And something that I've been thinking about in the wake of Jon Scheyer's promotion announcement is that Scheyer's only 33 years old and Nolan Smith is only 33 years old. Like, these guys are young guys to be running a program that, look, when Mike Krzyzewski was hired into this job, he was this age and didn't have a bunch of old heads around him running the show. But Duke basketball in 1980 is nothing like Duke basketball in 2021. And I think part of keeping Chris Carrawell around and promoting him into the associate position was having a guy who's a little bit more experienced. Like, Carrawell hasn't been a head coach, as you guys were talking about, but he has been an assistant for a lot longer than the two of them have. He's worked at other programs. He's worked on the women's program. So he knows a little bit more about sort of what's going on and can connect maybe to the older coaches. So while I do think there's a possibility that they'll want to bring in an even older retiring head coach. I know you guys were talking about Johnny Dawkins as a possibility. I think there are a number of older Duke alums who would make a lot of sense on this bench. Chris Carrawell at least is a step in that direction. He's not an old guy. He's only in his 40s. I think he's like 43, 44 years old, but at least brings a little bit more experience to the table. And I think that's going to be really valuable for Jon Scheyer to be connecting to the older alums and administrators and people that he needs to run the program.
One thing that was very insightful was the number of dominoes that did not fall or had to fall for this to happen. For example, Jon Scheyer, if he doesn't get his injury when he's with the Miami Heat, he's probably playing in Europe, or at least has played a lot longer. His playing career would have lasted a lot longer, so he wouldn't have had as much experience as an assistant coach.
Maccabi Tel Aviv. He would have played for Maccabi Tel Aviv for a long time, I bet.
Yeah, and he could have still been playing for all we know, because again, he's only 33 years old. If he doesn't get the DePaul job or other jobs that he had been interviewing for, does he leave then?
Donald, but wait, really quick. That's like, I really thought when the news came out that Scheyer was getting the job, sorry to interrupt you, but when the news came out that Scheyer was getting the job and we thought back on him interviewing for the DePaul job, I thought that like the DePaul interview was like a practice thing for him. Mm-hmm. Or, think about what, if he'd gotten the DePaul job, which was not a long shot, what would Duke have done? It would have been crazy. Would it have been a Bobby Cremins situation? Remember, Bobby Cremins went to South Carolina and then went, oh, wait, never mind. And came back to Duke. Would he have taken the DePaul job and then been like, wait, Coach K is retiring? I'll come back to Duke.
Right. But at the same time, here's another one. I think this might be the most intriguing domino. They mentioned in an article that they had interviewed Tommy Amaker, who of course is the head coach at Harvard. Now, for him and he wanted the job as well. But Coach K realized that if he took Amaker as the next head coach, he would have to resign from Harvard and be an assistant coach and be the coach in waiting here at Duke. That was all full because we at that point when they interviewed him, Nate James had not left yet. Jon Scheyer was still there. Chris Carrawell was there. I'm sorry. Nate James had just left, and they had just promoted Nolan Smith, which means that Nolan Smith would either had to have been demoted or someone would have had to have been let go from the coaching staff to make room for Amaker to be the next coach in waiting. That domino obviously didn't fall because they didn't want to break up the coaching staff. Here steps Jon Scheyer, who's already here, ready to go. I thought that was a very, very interesting nugget in that article that kind of, again, with all these different dominoes around, I thought that was the most intriguing.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that because I agree that the stuff about Tommy Amaker, and it really sounds like from this article that Scheyer and Amaker were the only ones really strongly considered. It doesn't appear that they maybe even interviewed Johnny Dawkins or anyone else for the job. And it makes some sense. I think, we've spent some time speculating about who's going to be Coach K. Amaker's one that makes a lot of sense. He's coached at the very, very high level. He's had some pretty good success at the very high level. He was very successful at Seton Hall and reasonably successful at Michigan. There were things that there were problems that happened there that weren't entirely his making. In fact, were not his making at all. So he's a guy who's shown he can recruit on the big stage, and he's handled a big program. So Amaker makes sense in a lot of different ways. And I think it's sort of interesting that the whole thing went down the way it did. And I don't know how much, what would they have done if Amaker had been like, yeah, I want it. And they said, he's the logical choice. That, would they have said to Nolan Smith, hey, step back for a year and then you'll be able to step in? I don't know. There are a lot of interesting things there.
And don't forget that right after the announcement came out, Tommy Amaker put out a statement saying how excited he was for Jon Scheyer. So I actually think that there may have been an element here where they were trying to create as little bad blood as possible. Because if you want to go down the list of people that you would think would feel slighted by the way this happened, I think Tommy Amaker would be near the top of the list of people who, it's not like he's Mike Bray, who's also like sort of towards the end of his career. Like Tommy Amaker's he's like a little bit younger than that and could reasonably have taken this program for 10 or 15 years. Jon Scheyer, if he's successful, could be in this role for as long as Coach K was, which is much farther out than we should care to speculate. But Steve Wojciechowski has been a head coach, so he's got basically all the credentials that Jon Scheyer has, save for like he didn't win a national championship as a player. Chris Collins is in that same boat. He's coached multiple national champions and has been a head coach and has taken another program to heights it hasn't seen before.
But I feel like Wojo, who got fired at Marquette,
yes,
and Collins, who had a couple good years but has struggled somewhat at Northwestern. I think you can look at their performance. Same with Jeff Capel. Look at their performance and sort of go, I'm not so sure. I don't think that's the same kind of case with Amaker. And by the way, the name we haven't mentioned, and I don't know what we're doing here, getting into who, because we already know who the coach is, but the name we haven't mentioned that I think probably could have gotten a call is Bobby Hurley, because he's done pretty well at Arizona State. He has been a good recruiter. Arizona State's had some good years. I think on-court performance combined with recruiting, Amaker and Hurley sort of slot in next.
One other name, by the way, that I think is incredible to forget is Nate James, who 4 months ago, he and Jon Scheyer had the exact same job. And now looking forward, Nate James is the Austin Peay coach, which look, Austin Peay is not Duke. It's a great job though. It seems like he's going to have a lot of support there. We talked about how Gerald Harrison's running the athletic department at Austin Peay. So there's a little bit of a Duke through line for Nate James in that program, but being the Austin Peay head coach is not being the Duke head coach. And none of these guys, by the way, my whole point was to say that all these guys could have been salty about it. And at least publicly, none of them are. And I feel like Duke did a good job of sort of managing the process. And you can see this in the way that the reporting came out in The Athletic, is that Duke managed this process in a way that felt fair to everybody, because it's not like Jon Scheyer in his telling or by other people's telling. It's not like Jon Scheyer felt like he was just the anointed one. He still had to go through an interview process. He was still nervous. He wasn't going to get it. It sounds like he was shaken up from not getting the DePaul job a couple months ago. So, and
he had the radio silence that
exactly
you would expect from that.
Which if you've, I don't know if you've ever intervied for a job and not heard,
God, it's so frustrating.
That feeling like, I know I didn't get it. It's just, they just got to call me and tell me. So,
and there's one other thing. 3 years ago, Jeff Capel's probably the front runner for this job. And he wasn't even really, it doesn't seem like fully considered. Before that, it was probably Wojo and Chris Collins. Before that, it was Johnny Dawkins. The evolution of the successor, the leader in the clubhouse, has evolved so much over the years. But it's really telling. I think that just the insightfulness of this, but I'll end with this. I commend Duke for doing something that apparently no one else could ever do, and keep one of the biggest job searches in the history of college basketball a secret for so long. Like, that is incredible that they were able to limit the number of people, and it doesn't seem like it was like a group of like 4 or 5 people who knew everything. It seemed like it was a pretty elaborate operation. A lot of people knew at least something about the process, and nobody spilled the beans until it was right about to be announced, which I think is incredible. So commend.
And by the way,
Coach
people
for
K,
that.
Even to the degree that, like, Coach K was obviously influencing the process. He knows all the people that were involved here, but he was not actually formally on the committee that was choosing Jon Scheyer. And so maybe that's all just for show. But it sounds like John Jackson was running the thing, and that they sort of ran it by the standard university protocol, in which Coach K is not, in the sort of hierarchy here, even though obviously he casts a very long shadow over the whole thing.
So if you have a subscription to The Athletic, definitely go and read that article by Brendan Marks and Seth Davis. Again, very insightful, very powerful piece, and something that, again, you're going to learn quite a bit about the inner workings of the Duke coaching search. But we will wrap it here for episode 323 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. A reminder, we had a couple of episodes today as we record on Wednesday, June 23rd. Go listen to the interview that we had with Lynn Simon about name, image, and likeness and the Supreme Court. Listen to you're obviously finished with this one. Stay tuned. We're going to have more coming in the coming weeks, obviously with the NBA playoffs coming up. We're entering the finals season, or getting very close to it. The NBA draft will be shortly after that. The Summer League will be shortly after that. But until then, for Jason Evans and for Sam Klein, I am Donald Wine. This is the Duke Basketball Report podcast, and it is time for the Duke Band to take us home.